from the Primal in the Woods studio in sunny Florida. It's the Primal in the Woods podcast with your host, Michael Toombs. This episode is brought to you by NFLcarports.com for all your steel building needs. Whether you're covering cars, toys, boats, tools, it doesn't matter. NFLcarports.com has you covered. Hi, everybody. It's Mike here with the Primal in the Woods podcast, episode 3. Today's date is December 20th, 2017. You know, there's a lot of conversation in keto world about protein, a lot of unnecessary conversation, I think, but conversation nonetheless. There seems to be a great disparity among opinions on what constitutes adequate protein, what constitutes too much protein, and what happens to that protein if you eat too much, and what happens to your body if you eat too little. Let me just start by sharing my experience with protein when I first started, okay? When I first started and first got into Mark Sisson and then developed sort of a more ketogenic approach to my Primal diet, I ate a lot of bacon and eggs, meats, vegetables, big ass chunks of steak, big pieces of chicken, lots of pork chops, just meat. I ate a lot of meat. And if you add up those grams of protein that I was eating back in the first, say, 3 or 4 weeks of a ketogenic diet, you would probably freak out. I did not add up my macros, so I have no idea exactly how much I was eating. But when I go back and calculate that type of quantity of food, I realize that I was eating probably between 160 to 200 grams of protein a day. Now at the time I was a big guy, 250 plus, 6'3", doing a little bit of exercise, nothing crazy, not a lot of heavy lifting or anything. But I ate massive amounts of protein, 3 meals a day. Breakfast was usually 3 or 4 eggs and a bunch of bacon. Lunch was usually like a whole string of like that German sausage or something like that. And then dinner was always a big ol' ass piece of steak or chicken or some kind of meat. But I didn't count anything. And over time, over that, I'd say somewhere between 2, 3, 4 weeks, that's when I really started noticing a change in appetite. I cut back to 2 meals a day. And then after several months, I noticed the meat portions I was eating got smaller and smaller and smaller. So without tracking a single thing and without having any preconceived notion in my head about how much protein I should eat, after a month or so, I just naturally stopped eating as much protein. And then after another few months of my appetite shrinking a little bit, I even cut it back a little further. So now, after maybe eating upwards of 200 grams a day at first, within 6 months, I was settled in around 120 to 130 grams of protein a day. And that was just based on my appetite for meat, okay? I didn't measure anything. I didn't have any preconceived notions about how much protein I should eat. I just naturally reduced the amount of protein I ate. Well, as most of us do when we've been eating this way for a long time and we have our diet pretty much dialed in and we're doing well and we're excited about what's going on with our bodies. I'm doing more and more reading and everybody wants to talk about this protein situation, about gluconeogenesis, about the mTOR pathway and shrinking telomeres, how protein will kick you out of ketosis, how too little protein will make your hair fall out, about how too much protein will make your hair fall out. And in 4 years of reading about this stuff, the only thing I can say for sure is that nobody knows, dear listener, how much protein you should be eating. That's something you're going to have to figure out for yourself. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, hey, prick, I'm here for answers. I'm not here for you to tell me I got to figure all this stuff out myself. But hang in here with me. I'm gonna by the end of the show, you're gonna know how to figure this out for yourself in a very, very easy way. It's gonna be painless. Okay, so in order to start this discussion, why don't we start with Dr. Ron Rosedale? Ron Rosedale has been a pioneer in diabetes research for years. He has done more mice studies than you can imagine. He's been doing low carb research for years, basically forever. Let's listen in for a few minutes to a presentation that Dr. Rosedale gave a while back. This was several years ago. However, his position has not changed since then. So let's just listen in real quick.
We are not our genes. We are the music that our genes play. Genetic expression. Meals regulate genetic expression more than anything. Food does. The breakfast I ate this morning will change at least 8,000 genes. I've got maybe 13,000. The difference between a man and a woman is about 200 genes. Okay. You can take a piano of 84 keys or so, and how many different songs can you play? Almost infinite variety. You can take your same genes and you can play the music of diabetes, or you can play the music of a long life and healthy life. It will be determined by what you eat, because what you eat regulates nutrient sensors, insulin, mTOR, and leptin, that regulate a longevity pathway. And when they were all kept low, which fools your body into believing that you are experiencing a famine, it upregulates repair mechanisms, DNA repair, intracellular antioxidant systems, autophagy, which is kind of a cellular garbage collection, heat shock proteins, all sorts of things that will allow you to stay healthy and outlive the famine so that you can reproduce at a future, more opportune time. And we can keep those things going post-reproduction if we keep insulin, mTOR, and leptin down. And the only way to do that is to keep glucose down and to keep protein down. Fat is a free fuel. It's not really involved in regulating the nutrient sensors. That's interesting. In other words, you can make your body believe that you are experiencing a famine and get all the benefits of fasting, get all the benefits of caloric restriction, but you don't have to do it. Just eat a lot of fat. And you get the same benefits, and I wrote a paper on that. It's published.
Okay, so what are Rosedale's recommendations for dietary protein intake? Dr. Rosedale suggests that we do 0.9 grams of protein per kilogram of ideal body weight. Okay, let's unpack that a second. All right, so if my ideal body weight is 185 pounds at 6'3", then we take 185 pounds divided by 2.2 to convert it to kilograms, and then we multiply that times 0.9 because we want 0.9 grams per kilogram of ideal body weight. That gives me about 75 grams of protein a day. 75 grams a day. Now that's nowhere near close to what I've been eating. I typically get about 120, 130, but let's just take that number of 75 and think about what that looks like. What that would look like to me, not getting into specific foods or anything, but what that would look like to me is I would need to reduce my current protein intake by 42%, which means if I'm eating 3 meals a day, I basically have to skip almost one of those meals or switch it all to fat. My current macros ratio, where I normally eat about 130 grams of fat and 130 grams of protein, that's just the food I like to eat. Dr. Rosedale is suggesting that either I'm going to have to change what I eat and stop eating meat and vegetables and, at least once a day and switch that to just some sort of fat. I'm not sure I'm willing to do that. So let's look at a few other opinions before we draw any conclusions. Let's shift gears and look to see what the Keto Gains guys recommend. If you've been doing any kind of online research into ketogenic diets, you've surely run across the Keto Gains guys. They are a popular group in the ketogenic bodybuilding world especially, and their followers are getting some pretty dramatic, amazing results when it comes to lifting heavy and eating ketogenic diets. Let's see what they say about protein. The Keto Gains recommendation for ideal protein amount is somewhere between 0.8 and 1.2 grams per pound of lean body mass. So just using me as an example here, my body has 158 pounds of lean body mass. So if I take their low end recommendation of 0.8, that gives me 126 grams of protein a day. Now, of course, I find that interesting because that's pretty much what I eat and I feel good doing it. But is that ideal? Then we have guys like Dr. Donald Layman, who suggests that it doesn't really matter how much protein you eat in a day as long as you have 30 grams of protein per meal. Now, where'd he come up with this? So in 2009, Dr. Layman did a study called Dietary Guidelines Should Reflect New Understandings About Adult Protein Needs. Just reading a little bit from the discussion from that study. Dr. Layman says consuming at least 30 grams of protein at each meal is critical because it triggers the insulin mTOR metabolic pathway for skeletal muscle protein synthesis and mitochondrial biogenesis. This increase in protein synthesis and mitochondrial proliferation then increases thermogenesis, calorie burning. In fact, Dr. Lehman says that energy expenditure of muscles involved in protein synthesis is greater than the expenditure when the muscle is doing intense exercise. This point is especially important for people wanting to lose fat but not muscle, and for the elderly to prevent sarcopenia, which is muscle loss associated with old age. If you eat less than 30 grams of protein at each meal, there's no protein synthesis effect. The protein is then wasted as simple calories. It gets converted to glucose or fat. For those with safety concerns, Dr. Lehman's research shows that consuming protein levels up to 2.5 to 3 grams per kilogram ideal body weight is safe intake. He found that in his research that most adults can't even eat more than that each day because they don't want it. Think of attempting to eat a 2-inch thick steak the size of a 10-inch dinner plate. That feeling you get when you consider eating the whole thing is an example of satiety. Lehman's research shows that protein intake should be consistent from meal to meal and from day to day. Eating large amounts all at once is not good, as much of the excess is lost, while at meals with low protein you get no benefit. So what about protein's effect on blood sugar and insulin? Well, Dr. Lehman says his research shows that protein and even branched chain amino acids cause a much lower insulin response than that of glucose from carbs. The insulin response of protein is only about 20% of what carbohydrate intake causes. Protein causes a phase 1 short-term response, whereas consuming carbs causes a much longer-term phase 2 response. It's this phase 2 response which is more detrimental. You know, this makes a little bit of sense to me, just in the fact that eating 1 or 2 meals a day or eating 5 or 6 meals a day to satisfy your hunger, if you consume roughly about 30 grams of protein per meal, that makes a little bit of sense to me. I'm not real sure that his research is conclusive. Some of the people would disagree with him, can show studies where it doesn't seem to really matter if you get all your protein in one meal or if you spread it out throughout the day. So let's just kind of leave a question mark on this guy's stuff but throw him in the mix. Okay, so we got Rosedale saying we should eat 0.9 grams per kg of ideal weight. We have the Keto Gains guys saying we should eat 0.8 to 1.2 grams per pound of lean body mass. And then now we got this guy saying, well, I don't give a shit how much you eat, just eat 30 grams per meal. See what I mean about this stuff not being that clear? Okay, let's keep going. What do the keto godfathers have to say? Let's see what Finney and Volek have to say. Let's throw in Dr. Westman into this group since they all kind of co-wrote New Atkins for a New You, the ultimate diet for shedding weight and feeling great. They recommend daily protein that's a little on the higher range, but what I like about their chart, if you've got to have a fucking chart, they've done it right. They give you ranges. For example, I'm 6'3". They're going to give me a range of 95 grams to 199 grams per day. And that makes a lot of sense to me. It's a huge range. I mean, there's a big difference between what 95 grams of protein and what 199 grams of protein looks like. But let's be honest. Do we really want to eat the same thing every day over and over and over again? Don't we want to just eat when we're hungry and then not eat if we're not hungry and sort of use that fat adapted metabolism that we have to our benefit? Do we really want to sit there and go, oh my God, I got to get X grams of protein today, so even though I'm not hungry, I have to eat this? Or, oh no, I've already hit my protein macros, I'm hungry, I got to find something that I just have to slug down a cup of fat because I can't have any more protein for today. No one wants to live like that. And let's be honest, a lot of you are doing that shit. But you don't have to, according to Finney and Volek. They say there's this huge range of protein you can eat, and as long as you're within that range, you're golden. Now, based on my experience, do I think that 199 grams is a little high? For me, of course it's high. 199 grams is high, but you know what? When I first started, I ate that. And I'll get in a little bit shortly into why we might need a little more protein when we first start out, and that it's sort of that natural progression towards lower appetite corresponds to our body's protein needs. But first, we're not done yet. Let's see what some others have to say. There's another guy that's pretty popular these days. His name is Thomas DeLauer, and if you take one look at him, you'll know why he's popular. He's a handsome fella, big guns, talking about eating a ketogenic diet. One of the reasons I like him is he makes a lot of sense when it comes to protein, and let me just let him tell you, not me. Here's Thomas DeLauer.
So what we want to look at here is that the heart and the brain are the only organs that actually require protein or glucose. All the other organs can actually function off of fatty acid metabolism. So we really have to look at how much the heart and the brain needs in the way of glucose when we're trying to determine how much protein we take in. The reason being is the body can always get glucose from every single energy source. The body can break down protein into amino acids and ultimately into glucose or sugar. The body can obviously break down carbohydrates into glucose. And then of course the body can actually break down fatty acids into glucose when necessary as well. However, for the most part, it's usually going to break down fatty acids into ketone bodies. Now when you're in any kind of fasting state, okay, and I say fasting state with a grain of salt because I mean that in terms of any kind of lower calorie diet or calorie deficit in general, the body doesn't break down as much in the way of protein from the tissue as you think it does. You see, we're not as catabolic as everybody thinks. The body is going to break down about 26% of protein from tissue, and it's going to break down about 74% of fat from tissue. So you're much more likely to be burning fat in a low-calorie diet than you are to be burning muscle. However, of course, we are all interested in making sure that we maintain our muscle whenever we are on any kind of diet. So let me talk about how much protein you actually need. And I'm going to get a little bit mathematical on you, but I'm going to try to break it down in a simple sense that everyone can understand. Now, your brain needs about 100 grams of glucose per day to function. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to go out and consume 100 grams of carbohydrates. Because, like I mentioned before, your body is very efficient at breaking down protein and converting them into glucose, and sometimes breaking down fats or glycerol into glucose whenever it needs it. What we have to look at is that your body starts assimilating about 75 grams, or 75% in this case, of its glucose from protein. The other 25% is going to come from glycerol. So right now we're looking at the fact the body's going to convert 75 grams or so of glucose from protein. Now that's when you're just starting a low-carb diet. That's in a normal functioning person. But here's the interesting thing, and I want you to pay attention. After 3 weeks, sort of this magical thing happens in the brain. Your brain starts to get adapted to running on fats, and suddenly the glucose requirements change. It drops down to about 40 grams of glucose needed per day. So that tells us right there, that's like a 60% decrease in overall need for glucose. Now, how this plays into the amount of protein you consume is pretty critical, because now, if we follow that same kind of ratio, the body is producing about 18 grams of glucose now from glycerol, from existing fats, and it's only requiring about 25 grams of glucose from protein. So suddenly your protein requirements changed. So what's important to note is that after that 3-week period, your protein requirements have changed. Because here's what's really important for the person that's in ketosis or the person that's on a low-carb diet. Okay, since your brain requirements have changed, if you go along consuming the same amount of protein that you have been consuming, while your brain is requiring less, that means that you have a spillover or an extra amount of protein that's not needed that your body is going to convert into glucose. That excess glucose can kick you out of ketosis or keep you out of that optimal low-carb range. That is very, very critical because that is how you ultimately burn fat. So really, how much protein do you consume? Well, it's going to vary from person to person depending on your activity, depending on your sex, depending on your age, depending on your overall stress. But one thing that we want to look at is nitrogen balance. And I've talked about nitrogen balance in other videos. But basically, nitrogen balance is how much protein you're consuming. If you are in a positive nitrogen balance, it means that your body has taken in enough protein, it's converted it into nitrogen, and now you have an abundance of nitrogen. That's a good indicator that you're taking in too much protein. Now, if you have a negative nitrogen balance, like I've talked about in other videos, that means you're not getting enough for your body to actually function, which means it's going to start breaking down muscle tissue. You want to be right around that equilibrium. You want to be right at that equal amount. And if you're wondering how you can test your nitrogen levels, well, you can simply use a nitrogen testing kit where you ultimately pee on a strip and it will tell you what kind of nitrogen balance you have. But if you just use simple logic and you realize that when you first start a diet, you need more protein, and as you go along, your requirements change, then you can be well ahead of the curve. But you don't want to be dramatically reducing your calories. So essentially what you're going to do is you're going to replace those protein calories with fat calories. Now remember, your protein calories are less than your fat calories, so your overall volume of food will decrease, but you want to keep the overall level of calories the same. Remember, we don't want that excess protein when we are on a low-carb diet because it converts to sugar.
I think that's pretty good advice, but he ends like so many people do, trying to set up this fear of protein converting to sugar via a pathway called gluconeogenesis. I, of course, defer to these scientists when it comes to knowing what's going on, but let me use some logic here from my understanding of metabolism. I have no fear of the protein I eat being converted to glucose. I mean, this happens in our body all the time. It's not just ketogenic people either. Sugar burners still convert proteins into glucose. There's a couple of cycles. The Cori cycle you can read up on is one way in which we turn lactic acid from the muscle into glucose. We've got the alanine glucose or glucose alanine cycle that is constantly converting the amino acid alanine into glucose and then back again. And, converting amino acids to glucose is a normal part of a healthy metabolism. And no one talks about, 5 of the 20 amino acids convert to ketones, not glucose. Leucine, lysine, phenylalanine, tyrosine, and tryptophan all convert straight into acetoacetate, one of the ketone bodies. I guess that's not quite true. A couple of those, the tyrosine and the phenylalanine, can also convert to glucose through a different pathway. But my point is, the body, the muscle cells, the liver, the kidneys have this incredibly complicated symphony playing. And talking about protein turning to glucose is like saying that the only instrument section that matters in this orchestra is the viola section. It's an important part of the orchestra, but there's a lot more going on than just that viola part. And let's go one step further. Let's say, okay, I'm going to say that it's as simple as extra protein I eat above, say, 90 grams per day is going to turn into glucose. So I have 30 extra grams of protein that's all going to be converted to glucose, which, by the way, isn't going to happen, but let's say it's going to happen. 30 grams of glucose. Oh my God, that's going to knock me out of ketosis. Well, maybe, okay, maybe. Your body's going to make some glucose anyway in order to supply certain brain cells and your red blood cells some energy. It's going to be creating glucose all the time anyway to maintain blood sugar levels. So what's going to happen to that 30 grams of glucose? You're either going to burn it or store it, right? Because glucose doesn't get excreted. It either gets stored or it gets burned. So we got 120 calories that are either going to get stored or that's going to get burned. Okay, that represents about, if let's say we store it all, oh no, we're gonna store it all as fat on your body. Okay, that is 0.066 pounds of body fat. If every one of those calories that 30 grams of excess protein is converted to glucose and then converted to fat to be stored as triglyceride, 0.066, your scale doesn't even register that. Your body can't even feel it. That's the weight of a small sip of water. It's nothing. Okay, so let's say it converts to glucose and your body uses it and you're kicked out of ketosis. How long are you going to be kicked out of ketosis on 120 calories of glucose? Well, you don't even know. You don't even know how fast you're going to burn through it, how quickly your insulin levels are going to drop back down again. And by the way, you're still burning fat and still making ketones and still burning ketones in that environment where you get a little 30-gram shove of glucose into your system, which also, by the way, isn't going to happen all at once in the instance of eating 30 grams too much protein. But worst case scenario, you're out of ketosis for a little bit, you're right back in. I don't think 30 grams of extra protein is going to make a big difference in the big scheme of your diet or your health. All right, so let's take all this and just sort of create a logical plan for me and you. Okay, what do I do? This is great information, Mike. Everybody's all over the place as far as what do they recommend. What should I do? Okay, I got a simple solution. If you want to look at this mathematically and if you want to calculate your macros for protein, do it like this. Okay, do 2 calculators. First, look up the Rosedale protein calculator and plug that number in. And whatever number Rosedale gives you for his optimal protein, set that as your low limit. Consider that your baseline protein needs. because he's a pretty radical dude, pretty confident dude, and the consensus is his recommendations are super, super low on the spectrum of being right. But hey, man, the guy's been researching this crap for 50 years. Trust him to at least be recommending the low end range of protein that you need in order for your body to operate. So find the Rosedale calculator, run your numbers through there, and can set that as your low end on the range. Then get the Keto Gains calculator and run your numbers through there and take their high end number, because they're going to give you a pretty good range. Take their high end number and set that as your cap. That's your cap. So if you're a 5'4", 150-pound female, your range is probably going to look something like 60 to 110 grams of protein as your daily range. And if having that big a range freaks you out, cut it into thirds, okay? So if you have that range, take the middle number of about 85 grams, give or take 10 grams, so you set your range at 75 to 95. You can't go wrong. Shoot for that range. Be okay with going a little under on days you're not that hungry. Be okay with going a little over on the days that you're more hungry. Now, you got to remember, human beings lived long, healthy lives for a long time before we even knew that this microscopic crap even existed. You know, if the hunt was good that day and there was plenty of protein to go around, you might eat a little extra. If the hunt was kind of lean and you're sharing the bounty of the hunt with the several people and there's not quite enough to fill everybody up, everybody just takes a little bit less and they get by. We are not designed to eat the exact same quantity of the exact same thing every day. Okay, we're not dogs and cats. Hell, they're not designed for it either, but you know, we're not slaves like they are either. We're not relying on our owners to feed us. We have the capacity to eat this wondrous variety of foods in different quantities, different qualities, different times of day, when we're hungry, when it's the right time to eat. You know, living in this modern world is both a blessing and a curse. It's a curse because there's always food around and, you know, we're kind of genetically wired just to eat the shit if it's sitting there. It's a blessing because we can sort of pick and choose our food battles, and we can eat when we're hungry. We can eat the appropriate dose of food every time without respect of, you know, the whether the hunt was successful or whether the lettuce is in season and all that kind of crap. We don't have to worry about any of that. All we have to do is eat a hunger stimulated dose appropriate amount of food every time we eat. And if that food looks like meat, eggs, vegetables, low glycemic fruits, dairy, seeds, nuts, healthy fats, then the protein is kind of going to work itself out. At least it will if you allow yourself a range. I mean, if you're letting MyFitnessPal dictate what you eat, then yeah, you're going to struggle with this. But if you allow yourself a range of protein, and like Thomas DeLauer said, if you allow yourself to eat a little less and less protein as the diet goes on, because our brains are become adapted to using ketones instead of glucose for fuel, our requirements for glucose, therefore our requirements for gluconeogenesis, therefore our requirements for protein go down. But you're going to notice with your hunger is going to go down anyway. Your hunger is going to go down naturally. The amount of food you put on your plate is going to go down naturally over those first weeks and months of eating low carb. So let nature do its job, you know? Track if you're going to track. That's cool, man. A lot of people need to track in order to stay on focus and stay on point. My point is, give yourself a range. Don't obsess about some specific number of protein that you feel like you have to hit every day. And if you go a little bit below, your hair is going to fall out. And if you go a little bit above, you're going to get knocked out of ketosis. That's not how it works. It's way more complicated. And this incredible thing called your body, called your metabolism, is going to make the best of the situation you give it. Trust your body. Find your protein range that makes sense logically, that keeps you satisfied as you eat day to day. You know, pick a starting point and then feel free to tweak it as you go. I eat less protein probably than I ever have in my life, but I eat enough. I don't eat too much. If I was eating too much protein and I was constantly being kicked out of ketosis, I would have started gaining weight back by now. Okay? I maintain my weight when I eat a ketogenic diet that gives me the protein and the calories that my body wants. And I'm not afraid of a 200 gram protein day. I mean, I don't have them, but I'm not afraid of them. If I do just decide to totally pig out on meat one day, it's not going to hurt me. Might it kick me out of ketosis for a few hours? Sure. Might I store a little bit of fat? Sure. Is it measurable? No. What will be measurable is if you're constantly eating too little protein and you feel like shit. That's going to be measurable. What will be measurable is if you're constantly engorging on food and feeling like shit. That's measurable. Going over a little on your protein here and there, that's not going to make a difference in the big scheme of your ketogenic diet and your goals. All right, and if you're too lazy to Google those two calculators I talked to you about, let's make it even easier. If you're a chick, do 70 to 90 grams. Set that as your initial range. Eat it for a couple weeks and see what happens. If you're a dude, 110 to 130, somewhere in that ballpark. It's a good place to start. And then if you're in your first 3 or 4 weeks and you eat more than that, don't worry about it. Matter of fact, if you're tracking in your first 3 or 4 weeks, you're crazy. At first, you're going to be hungry all the time and you're going to eat a lot more. Okay? That data is useless for establishing your healthy baseline. Eat the right foods for 30 days before you track a damn thing. And then as those hunger signals, as your desire for protein, and as your body takes over and starts making sense with what it's telling you, then it's time to kind of track and watch the magic. You don't give a kid a test on the first day of school. If you do, you're a dick. Teach your body something first, then start examining after it's had a chance to absorb the new inputs that you're giving it through your proper diet of whole foods, ketogenic foods, meats, eggs, vegetables, fish, fowl. You know the drill. Okay, folks, it's now time for great answers to stupid questions from Facebook diet groups. First up is Alicia, who writes, what would happen if I would just have a tiny bite of cake? I'm sorry to sound so lame, but I haven't cheated for almost a year. Will I get sick? Kick me out of ketosis? For how long? Be craving sweets all day or a week? So, Alicia, you're projecting way more power onto a bite of cake than it deserves. A fork full of cake can't do any of the things you mentioned, okay? Now, your overreaction to eating a bite of cake can do all those things. Physically, one bite can't do any damage. Now, emotionally, it can. The first time I ate something off plan, and it was very similar to that. It was just a small bite of something that I'm not supposed to eat, right? It messed with my head a little bit. I had gone months just feeling sort of impenetrable, feeling too strong to succumb to a bite of cake. But there I was, and I took the bite. Screw it. It wasn't quite as enjoyable as I thought it would be. It didn't cause me to go crazy and want to eat a whole cake. It didn't throw me out of ketosis that I'm aware of. I mean, surely it may have spiked my insulin for a second or whatever. I don't know how many carbs you can really get from a fork full of cake. And after almost a year of eating ketogenically, surely you're fat adapted enough to handle a little glucose spike. So I think your question is kind of silly. A bite of cake's not going to hurt you physically. On the mental side of it, it's just, are you strong enough to go, that was good, and move on? That's how this thing becomes sustainable anyway, is getting to that point to where those decisions you make to enjoy something that may or may not be good for you, that you handle right mentally. I mean, physically, your body's going to handle it. How you handle it mentally and what happens next and what happens with the next thing you put in your mouth, that's the whole ball game. So, no, yeah, eat the bite of cake. If it's that important to you, move on guilt-free, stress-free, and move ahead with your program and make sure that the next meal you eat is the right foods. Okay, Jessica writes, so I was off keto last weekend. Back on it now, but I'll be off it again over New Year's for 4 to 5 days. Do you think it's worth staying on it for the next 1.5 weeks or just eat healthy until the new year? I'm conflicted. Jessica, you are conflicted because you don't even know what eat healthy means, okay? You're talking as if eating keto and eating healthy are two separate things. If that's the case, if that's what you truly feel, then you shouldn't even eat keto at all because you don't get it. Okay, you don't believe in it. You don't have the understanding of how it's going to improve your health. Okay, because if low carb is the right diet for you, then eating healthy means eating low carb. And you can do that and still go on your vacations and have your holidays and do all that crap. You can eat low carb and still, if you're going to have some indulgences or whatever, that's fine. This idea that you have to make this mental decision. Okay, well, I am not going to be keto for the next 1.5 weeks because I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to go back to eating keto. That's bullshit. I don't know what to tell you, man. If your social calendar is going to dictate what you think is healthy eating, then you got a lot to learn, and I don't think you're going to be successful until you dial in your understanding of the diet and understanding of how your body works. You got more work to do before anyone can even give you any kind of counsel on this. You're going to do what you're going to do. You're going to go off the rails. You're going to come back January 2nd and act like the world owes you something, and I'm sorry, that's just not how it is. Okay, last one for today. Laura writes, okay, folks, I'm gearing up to start the keto lifestyle. I read a book, I did some research, bought a cookbook, cleaned out the pantry, made a 2-week menu, and created my shopping list. For you veterans, what am I missing? If you knew then what you know now, what would you have done differently? Holy crap, that's not a stupid question at all. That's an awesome question. Some of the answers this chick got are fucking ridiculous, though. Check this out. So this one answer is, and let's keep in mind, this is an intelligent woman who's researched this diet and is asking an intelligent question. She gets answers like, if you're doing BPC, I recommend blending it. I finally did this after a year and it made a huge difference in flavor. Another answer is, most people initially exceed the amount of protein recommended on a ketogenic diet, blah, 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 blah. Someone else told her to track her spices. One person says, Google fat bomb recipes and have them handy during Shark Week. Fuck's sake. Someone else says, make sure you have some stevia packets when you go out. Another person says, anytime you have a craving for something, first drink water and see if it goes away. Really? This is like your big nugget of wisdom for someone who's just starting out? Jesus. Those seem kind of like some goofy answers to me. What I would tell this person is, Laura, do you have a clearly defined goal that you're willing to get uncomfortable to achieve? I didn't. Even though I was 100% behind the science, totally on board with the food, certain that this was the right thing for me to do, I didn't have a lot of focus. I was just like, I want to eat healthier. My lack of focus caused me some problems here and there. Nothing major. I'm happy with the road I've taken, but had I started with a real goal and a solid plan, I believe I would have eaten a little better, probably exercised more, definitely consumed less alcohol. 4 years later, I'm still not quite where I want to be. And it's not that I'm lazy. It's not that I go off the rails all the time. I eat my meats and eggs and vegetables. I've just never had that much of a plan beyond eat these things and not those things, at least not at first. So other than that, I have no regrets. My only regret is I didn't come into this with an actionable plan. And to be quite honest, had my wife not been there to be strong when I was weak and vice versa, I'm not sure that we would have made it like we made it. I don't think, had we not done this together and been there to sort of firewall each other from making dumb decisions, I don't think Rachel would be a size 0 right now. I wouldn't be a Primal health coach recording podcasts about diet. I wouldn't have the confidence to look a fat diabetic in the eye and say, bitch, I know how to fix this. So make a goal, Laura. Make a plan. Stay focused. Stay on track. Don't take 4 years to get there like I did. All right, folks, I guess that about wraps up this edition of the Primal in the Woods podcast. Check us out next week for episode 4 coming at you on the 27th of December. I don't have a topic picked out for that one yet. I'll see what floats to the top in the research that I do this week. All of you have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, be well, be safe, and most importantly, don't eat crap. Take care of yourself, and we will talk to you after Christmas. Peace. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing in this podcast is intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any disease, and none of the recommendations in this podcast have come from a doctor. If you're sick, go see a doctor.